Up the stairs, now. Henrik did not say hello. He did not nod. He did not do the head tilt he'd been doing for me every weeknight for the year I'd lived in the building. He stepped out from behind the small front desk, the one with the visitor log and the little dish of mints nobody ever took, and he stepped directly into the path between me and the elevator bank. I stopped. I'd been walking with my keys already out, the way you walk when you've come home at the same time on the same kind of Wednesday for 50 Wednesdays in a row. My grocery bag was on my left hip, my phone was in my coat pocket. My hair was up in the clip I'd been wearing since lunch, and the clip was loose by then, the way it gets. And I'd been thinking about the chicken in the bag, and whether I was going to bother making the side salad I'd bought lettuce for. Henrik said, Hi, Enos, I am sorry, stairs, just for tonight. Not the elevator. I said, Henrik, what? He said, take the stairs. I'll explain in a few minutes. I will come up, I promise. I have to stay here right now. He was standing close enough that I could see the small bead of sweat at his temple. Henrik did not sweat. Henrik was the kind of man whose uniform always looked freshly pressed, even at the end of a 12-hour shift, who had a small thermos of tea that smelled like cinnamon, who had told me once that he had been on the night desk of this building for 11 years, and that he had memorized the sound every individual tenant's car made pulling into the small garage downstairs. I said, okay. He said, thank you. I walked past the elevator bank. I went to the stairwell door. I pushed it open. I went up. I lived on the 8th floor. 8 flights of stairs is not, in absolute terms, that many. 8 flights of stairs at the end of a long Wednesday, with a bag of groceries is on your hip, and a man at the front desk who had just told you not to use the elevator is a different kind of 8 flights. I went up slowly. I didn't run. I didn't speed walk. Some part of me had decided on the second flight that whatever was happening in the elevator was something I did not want to arrive on my own floor for in an out-of-breath kind of way. I took my time. I climbed the way you climb when you have nowhere to be. I got to the 8th floor. I opened the stairwell door onto my hallway. The hallway was quiet, the way it always was at 6:40 in the evening. The small light by the elevator was on. The carpet was the same gray it had been at lunch. The framed print at the end of the hall was the same vague watercolor of a harbor that had been there for the entire year. But the elevator door, halfway down the hall, was open. It was open and it was holding. The little chime that the elevator made when its doors opened was not chiming. The doors were just standing there, parted, the small interior light on, the elevator car visible, empty. I stood in the doorway of the stairwell. I held my groceries. I tried to think about whether I had ever, in 50 Wednesdays, walked off the stairwell and seen the elevator doors just standing open like that, with no chime, with no person stepping in or out, with nobody pressing a button to make it go anywhere. I had not. My apartment was at the very end of the hall, past the elevator, past 2 other doors. I had to walk past the elevator to get to my apartment. I did not walk past the elevator. I stood in the stairwell doorway, and I watched the open elevator for what was probably 20 seconds and felt like 100. The doors did not close. The car did not move. Nothing on the floor changed. I stepped back into the stairwell. I let the door close behind me. I went down 1 flight to the 7th floor. I sat on the top step of the 7th floor landing. I called Henrik. He picked up on the first ring. He said, Eins, are you in the stairwell? I said, yes. He said, where? I said, 7. He said, stay there. Don't go up. Don't come down. I am sending 2 officers up the stairwell from the lobby right now. They will be there in 2 minutes. They will identify themselves before they reach you. Do not move. I said, Henrik, the elevator doors are open on my floor. They are not closing. He went quiet for half a second. He said, I know. The elevator is being held there. Stay where you are. He hung up. I sat on the top step. I put the grocery bag down beside me. I put my keys in my coat pocket. I put both my hands flat on my knees because my hands had started doing the small shaking thing they do when I've held something heavy for too long, except I had not been holding anything heavy. I had been holding a bag of groceries that weighed maybe 6 pounds. The shaking was not from the bag. I want to tell you that I sat there and thought about what was happening. I did not. I sat there and thought about absolutely nothing. My brain went to a small flat empty place that it goes to sometimes when it knows it is not going to be able to handle whatever is next if it tries to think about it in advance. I have been to that place maybe 4 times in my life. I went to it on the 7th floor landing. I heard footsteps coming up the stairwell. 2 pairs. Slow, even, deliberate. The footsteps of people who had been told there was a person sitting on a landing who did not need to be startled. A man's voice from 1 flight below said, Eins? Officer Bram Halverson, Police Department. I am with Officer Pia Sundqvist. We are coming up to your landing. We will be in uniform. We are going to stop on the landing below you, so you can see us before we come up. Is that all right? I said yes. They came up to the landing below mine. They stopped. They looked up at me. They were in uniform. Bram was tall and looked tired. Pia was shorter and looked alert. Bram had a small notebook in his hand. Pia had her hand near her radio, but not on it. Bram said, "Ines, can we come up to your step?" I said, yes, they came up. They did not crowd me. Pia stood about 4 feet away. Bram crouched down, so he was closer to my eye level than my standing over me level. He said, "We are going to ask you to come down with us to a small office on the 2nd floor. The building has a security room. Henrik is there. Your building manager is on his way. We are going to explain everything in that room. We are going to bring your groceries. We are not going to your apartment tonight. You will not be returning to your apartment tonight. We have arranged a hotel for you, 3 blocks away, at the building's expense. A staff member from the building will come with you to the hotel and stay in the lobby until you are settled. Are you all right to come?" I said yes. I picked up my groceries. We went down. We did not take the elevator. The security room on the 2nd floor was a small room behind the small office where the building manager usually sat. It had a wall of monitors. The monitors showed views of the lobby, the garage, the 4 sides of the building, the backloading area, the small mail room, and the hallway on every floor, including mine. Henrik was there. He was sitting at a chair by the monitors. He had his thermos of tea next to him. He had not been drinking the tea. The tea was full. The building manager arrived 4 minutes after we got there. His name was Marvin. He was 60-something. He had been the manager since the building had opened in the early 90s. He came in and he shook my hand and he asked me, with a very gentle face, if I had eaten dinner. I said no. He said he would order me something. I said I was not hungry. He said he was going to order it anyway and I could eat it if I wanted to. He turned to Bram and Pia and said, "Are we ready to show her?" Bram looked at me. He said, "Ines, we are going to show you about 90 seconds of security footage. The footage is from the elevator on your floor. The footage is from the last 40 minutes. The footage does not contain anything graphic, but it does contain a person who has been doing something inside the elevator that you need to know about before you make any decisions about the next several days of your life. The person is not you. You are not in the footage. Are you ready?" I said yes. Henrik turned to the monitor. The screen showed the inside of the elevator car. The view was from the small fisheye camera in the upper corner. The footage started with the elevator empty. A timestamp at the bottom read 18:1. A man stepped into the elevator. He was wearing a baseball cap pulled low. He was wearing a dark jacket. He had a small backpack. He pressed a button on the panel. The doors closed. The elevator went up. The footage cut, the way footage cuts when there's no motion to record, and resumed with the doors opening. The elevator was on the 8th floor. He did not step out. He stood at the threshold. He looked down the hallway. From the angle of the camera, I could see him from the back. I could see him looking. He looked for maybe 4 seconds. Then he pressed a button on the panel. The doors closed. The elevator went down. The footage cut. It resumed with the doors opening again on a different floor. He stood at the threshold again. He looked. He pressed a button. The footage cut and resumed 3 more times. The elevator went up. It went down. It went up. It went down. Each time he stood at the threshold. Each time he looked. Each time he did not get off. After the 5th cycle, on the 8th floor again, he did something different. He stepped just outside the doors. He held the elevator open with his foot. He turned around. He took off his backpack. He set it on the floor of the elevator, against the wall, in the small dead space where the security camera's fisheye would have a hard time seeing the bottom of the bag. He opened the bag. He took out something. The footage was not high enough resolution to show what it was. It was small. It fit in his hand. He held it for a few seconds. He looked at it. He put it back in the bag. He zipped the bag. He left the bag on the floor of the elevator. He stepped back out into the hallway. He stood there for a few seconds. Then he pressed the call button on the wall panel outside the elevator, the one that holds the elevator open. He held it. The doors stayed open. He walked, slowly, down the hallway toward the stairwell at the far end of the floor. He went into the stairwell. The footage cut to a different camera, the stairwell camera. He went down. He went down all 8 flights. He came out of the stairwell into the backloading area on the ground level. He walked out the back door. He was gone. Henrik paused the footage. I stared at the frozen image on the screen. The backpack was still on the floor of the elevator. The doors of the elevator were still open. The hallway was still empty. I said, "What is in the bag?" Bram said, "We don't know yet." The building called us at the moment Henrik recognized the pattern, which was at the start of the 3rd cycle. We have been watching the live feed since then. The fire department is here. They are in the lobby. They have not gone up yet because they wanted to make sure no resident was about to walk off the 8th floor elevator, which is why Henrik had to stop you from going up. They are going up now with the proper equipment to examine the bag. We will know what is in it within the next hour. The building has been quietly notified, floor by floor, that there is a maintenance issue with the elevator and that residents should use the stairs for the rest of the evening. We are not at this time evacuating the building because we do not have evidence that there is an active threat. We have evidence that there is a bag. We are going to find out about the bag. We are going to act accordingly. I sat in the chair. I said, "Why my floor?" Bram looked at Pia. Pia said, "Eins, the man in the footage. Do you recognize him?" I said, "I could not see his face." She said, "We are going to ask you to look at a few stills with the cap removed. We have one frame from when he was in the lobby earlier before he got in the elevator, where he took the cap off for a second to scratch his head. The frame is clear. Are you ready?" I said yes. She pulled up the frame. I looked. It was Calder. Calder was my upstairs neighbor's son. He was 26. He had moved into his mother Marisol's apartment 6 months ago when he had, by her description to me over the mailbox bank one Saturday morning, needed a soft landing for a little while. Marisol was 68 and had lived in the building for 15 years. She was an artist. She made small textile pieces that she sold at a craft fair in the spring. She had been kind to me. She had given me a small woven coaster as a housewarming gift the week I moved in. Calder had not been kind. Calder had not been unkind, exactly. He had been a presence. He had been at his mother's door when I came down the hall to my apartment. He had been at the mailboxes when I came down to get my mail. He had been on the small bench outside the front of the building when I came home from work. He had been doing his laundry in the basement when I had gone down to do mine. He had, over 6 months, been a face I had been seeing more often than seemed mathematically reasonable for a man who lived 3 floors above me in a building with 240 units. I had told myself every time that it was a coincidence. I had told myself every time that he was just a young man going through a hard time and that he was bored, and that boredom in your mother's apartment meant being in the hallways more than the average tenant. I had told myself that he had never said anything inappropriate to me. He had said hello. He had held the door once. He had asked me, a month ago, what I did for work, and I had told him I worked in compliance for a small bank, and he had said huh and walked away. He had not been inappropriate. He had been a man in the hallways. I had told myself this even after the night, 3 weeks ago, when I had come home from a late dinner and found a small folded piece of paper slipped under my door with no writing on either side. I had told myself it was a flyer that hadn't gotten finished. I had thrown it away. I had told myself this even after the morning, 10 days ago, when I had come out of my apartment and the small potted plant outside my door had been turned, not knocked over, just rotated, so the side I had been growing toward the hallway was now facing the wall. I had told myself this even after the small set of other things I had told myself were nothing. I looked at the frame on the screen. I said, "His name is Calder. His mother lives on floor 11. He moved in with her 6 months ago. I have been seeing him in the hallways." Pia wrote something in her notebook. She said, "Eins, we are going to ask you a few questions about Calder. Some of them are going to be hard. We are going to take it slowly. Are you all right to talk for a few minutes?" I said yes. We talked for a few minutes. The bag, when the fire department opened it on the 8th floor landing about an hour later, contained a small set of tools. The tools were the kind of tools a person uses to remove a deadbolt from the inside of a door. The bag also contained a small folded piece of paper with my apartment number written on it. The bag also contained a small spare key. The spare key was a copy of the key to Calder's mother's apartment. We did not that night fully understand what the spare key meant. It would take another 2 weeks to understand. The understanding, when it came, was that Calder had been planning a thing that, by his own later admission to investigators, he had not entirely planned. He had been building toward it for the previous 3 months. He had been telling himself, for the previous 3 months, that he was going to enter my apartment, that he was going to wait inside it, and that he was going to confront me about a perceived insult I had given him at the mailboxes one Saturday morning, 11 weeks ago. The insult, by his own description, had been that I had said "excuse me" in a tone he had felt was condescending. He had been building in the 11 weeks since the "excuse me" a small private case for why I needed to be confronted about it. He had been escalating his presence in my daily life as a way of, in his own words, giving me chances to correct the insult. The chances in his head had been him being in the hallway. The chances in my head had been him being in the hallway. He had not been planning, by the original architecture of his plan, to physically harm me. He had been planning to enter my apartment, wait, and talk. The talking, however, was the talking of a man who had been incubating a small grievance for 11 weeks, and the talking would have happened in a locked apartment, alone with me, at the end of a long workday, with no witnesses and no easy way for me to leave. Whether the talking would have stayed the talking, the investigators have told me, is something none of us, including Calder, are in a position to know. He had decided to execute the plan that Wednesday, because his mother had told him, that morning, that she was going to be out of town for the weekend. The out-of-town news had been, in his small private timing, the green light. He had spent most of Wednesday afternoon riding the elevator. He had been, by his own later account, trying to time his approach to my apartment door for the small window between when I came home from work and when I would have settled in. The riding had been him steadying himself. The riding had also been him making sure no other tenant was on the 8th floor hallway when he arrived. Henrik had noticed the elevator ride pattern on the 3rd cycle. He had been a doorman for 11 years. He had told me, later, that the elevator went up and down all evening, the way elevators do, but that it did not, in his 11 years, go up and down with the same person inside it, making the same circuit for 40 consecutive minutes. The first cycle, he had thought, was somebody who had forgotten which floor they were going to. The second cycle, he had thought maintenance was checking something. The third cycle, the patterning had crystallized in his head, and he had picked up the phone. He had called the building manager. The building manager had called the police. The police had been on their way before I had walked into the lobby with my groceries. Henrik had been waiting for me. The "do not take the elevator" had been the only sentence he had time to come up with in the half-second between when I walked through the door and when I would have pressed the call button. The fact that he had used a full sentence rather than waving or gesturing was something I have, in the 4 months since, thought about. He had decided, in his half-second, that the sentence was going to be more efficient than the gesture. The sentence had worked. Han Greller, Calder was arrested at his mother's apartment that night, around 9. He had come back to the building, through the back loading area, about an hour after he had left. He had taken the stairs up to the 11th floor. He had let himself into his mother's apartment with his key. He had been sitting on her couch when the officers had knocked. He had not resisted. He had asked, when they had taken him in, whether his mother was going to find out. The officers had told him yes, his mother was going to find out. His mother found out. The finding out was, by every account I have been given, a thing she has not recovered from. She has not, in the 4 months since, gone back to her apartment. She is staying with a sister in Vermont. The building manager has been holding her unit for her without charging rent. He has told me, when I asked, that he is going to keep holding it until she is ready to make a decision about whether to come back. He has told me he does not, in his 30 years of building management, throw widows out of their apartments because their adult sons committed crimes. He has told me this is one of the few things he is sure of. Calder took a plea 3 months later. He is in a state facility. The plea included terms that prevent him from coming within 500 feet of the building, of me, or of any address I am living at, for 10 years after his release. The terms include monitoring. The terms are the terms. The investigators have told me, in their own careful language, that they think the terms are sufficient. I do not, in any meaningful way, share the certainty. I have decided I am going to act as if the terms are sufficient and to hold, in the back of my own thinking, the awareness that I am not the one in charge of whether they are. I am the one in charge of what I do with my own life. That is the only part I have a vote on. I moved out of the building 2 months after that Wednesday. The move was not a panic move. The move was a slow, careful move that I made after a lot of conversation with a therapist named Lila, and after one long conversation with the building manager. The building manager had offered me, several times, to break my lease at no cost and to help me find a unit in a different building they managed across the city. I had taken him up on the offer. I am now in a smaller unit in a smaller building with no elevator. I live on the 2nd floor. I take the stairs every day, all the way up, every time. Henrik is still the night doorman at the old building. I have visited him twice. The first time, I brought him a small box of chocolates and a card. He accepted them with the small, careful dignity he has about everything. He did not, on either visit, make a big thing of what happened. He said hello. He asked how my new place was. He asked whether the 2nd floor was treating me well. He told me he had been thinking, in the last few months, about retiring at the end of the year, and that the thinking had not been because of what happened, but that what happened had clarified a few things he had been working out on his own for a while. He did not elaborate. I did not ask. He gave me a small thing on the second visit. He gave me one of the small mints from the dish on the front desk. He told me he had been wondering, for 11 years, who the mints were for, since nobody ever took them. He told me he's decided, that day, that the mints were for me. He gave me the whole dish. He told me to put it in my new apartment. He said the dish was, in his way, the small physical record that the building had been my building, and that he had been the man at the desk in my building, and that the time we had shared on the small physical record had been good time. He told me to take a mint out of the dish, whenever I needed to remember that good people had been on the other side of the desk, and that they had been watching. I have the dish on a small shelf in my new kitchen. The mints are still in it. I have not eaten one. I am not going to eat one. The eating is not the point. The dish is the point. The dish sits on the shelf. The dish is mine. I want to tell you something, and I am not going to dress it up because I think the dressing up is the thing I have been doing for years, and it has not served me. I had ignored 11 different things about Calder. Over the 6 months he had lived 3 floors above me. The 11 different things had each, individually, been small. I had explained each of them away. I had told myself, each time, that I was being dramatic, that I was being unkind to a young man going through a hard time, that I was being the kind of woman who reads danger into ordinary masculine presence, and is, therefore, the kind of woman the culture has taught me not to be. I had been wrong, on 11 different small occasions. The 11 small occasions had been the trail. The trail had led to a Wednesday in November. I am not telling you this so you will go home and start suspecting your neighbors. I am telling you this because there is a specific kind of training that women get, starting around the age of 12, that involves rationalizing the small wrong things in our daily environment. The training is not entirely our fault. The training was given to us. It has names like being nice and not making a big deal and not overreacting and being charitable. The training has, in the small majority of cases, served us. The training has, in the rare bad case, gotten us killed. I am not going to tell you to stop being nice. I am not going to tell you to start suspecting people. I am going to tell you something smaller. I am going to tell you that the next time you notice a small, wrong thing, you should write it down. That is the only suggestion I have. Write it down, in a notebook, in a note on your phone, on the back of a receipt, anywhere. Just write it down. The writing is not for anybody else. The writing is for you. The writing is the way you stop telling yourself, every time, that the small wrong thing did not happen. The writing makes the small wrong thing into a record. The record, over time, becomes a pattern. The pattern, when you read it back 6 months later, tells you whether you have been imagining things or whether you have been collecting evidence. I did not write any of the 11 things down. If I had written them down, I do not know if I would have figured anything out. I do not know if writing them down would have changed any of the 11 small Wednesdays where I told myself I was being dramatic. But I do know that if I had written them down, I would have had the record. The record is the thing you have when you decide, finally, that the small wrong things are not nothing. I have a notebook now. The notebook is small. I keep it in the kitchen drawer next to the mint dish. I do not mostly write in it. I have written in it 4 times in 2 months. The 4 times have all been small things that turned out to be nothing. I have written them down anyway. The writing has not so far produced any patterns. The writing has produced a small habit. The habit, in its small ordinary way, is the only practice I have figured out that does not require me to either be more paranoid than I want to be, or more agreeable than I should be. The notebook holds the small wrong things without forcing me to do anything about them. If they turn into a pattern, the pattern will be there. If they do not, I will have a small notebook with a few entries in it, and the notebook will sit in my kitchen drawer, and nothing will come of it, and that will be fine. The not coming of anything is also the practice. The practice is enough. The mint dish is on the shelf, the notebook is in the drawer, the stairs are mine, the second floor is mine. The chicken in the bag I had been carrying the Wednesday I found out about Calder is, somewhere in the small private architecture of my memory, also mine. As the last meal I had been planning when I had still been a woman who had not yet figured any of this out. I cooked the chicken 3 days later, in my new apartment on a Saturday afternoon by myself. It was fine. I ate it with the side salad I had bought lettuce for. The lettuce had wilted by then. I ate it anyway. The eating was the practice that day. The eating is, on most days, the only practice. The eating is enough. Pick up your notebook. Write down the small wrong thing. Eat your chicken. Climb your stairs. That is the entire thing.